Director of Community Outreach and Partnerships for Corazón Latino. We are based in Washington, D.C., but we do a lot of work in the area where I live in Cheverly, Maryland, Prince George's County. So we've had great successes there connecting with the Latino community and really engaging them in a meaningful way. This is my second time around with Naturally Latinos Conference. This time around, I was actually on the planning committee. I was also a presenter speaker, so I got to moderate a panel on expanding Latino influence in the environmental world, both in the C-suite or executive level positions, but also on boards. It's really important to include the Latino perspective on decision-making and in programming, to think about the different ways that Latinos engage and interact with our green spaces and how they might be able to feel more invited in some of the programming that goes on. My name is Aveda Libo. Some of you know me as Abel. And to start this panel, I will give you a little bit of story, a little bit about my background and where I'm from. I'm a fourth generation Tejano. I was born in Texas, but was raised in Ohio. Naturally, there were not a lot of Latinos there. My family were migrant farm workers, so we moved a lot. And growing up, it was a little out of place. I felt a little out of place, but my dad, specifically, always made sure to make it just a little bit better. And I'll give you an example. In second grade, my brother came home with a project. They were learning about the prairie days or whatever it was. And our project was to make a Conestoga wagon. And so he and my brother, they worked on it, and at the end, the big presentation, it was a little different. And I'm like, Dad, that doesn't really look like a Conestoga wagon. He's like, no, it's a lowrider Conestoga. I was like, well, okay, para que sepan, right? That's what he would say. Also, another story, my dad spoke perfectly fine English, but when we would go to the drive-thrus or talk to non-Spanish speakers, he would specifically and purposely make his English so broken just to make the other person, I don't know, struggle. And I'm like, Dad, why do you do that? Again, he would say, para que sepan. So that the next people, the next family who didn't have the advantage that he did of being able to speak English or to know a little bit about the culture, could have a little bit of experience and so that they can have some perspective. And that is exactly what this panel is about. The importance of bringing Latino perspective into the environmental world. And with that, I'll start to introduce the panelists here. Their bios are in the program. Excuse me. First, we have Vanessa Moyenero. Vanessa is the daughter of Peruvian immigrants who was raised in Gaithersburg, Maryland. At Solidarity Strategies, she developed and implements strategic communications and voter contact programs for progressive candidates and nonprofits, provides advice to candidates, and runs programs from multi-district GOTV to grassroots lobbying. In 2016, Vanessa helped elect 6 new Latino members of Congress. Very good. And later aided, thank you, very good. Later aided in their re-election. She recently helped flip the House of Representatives who worked through the DCCC's Year of Engagement. Vanessa was instrumental in creating and leading the National Association of Diverse Consultants to promote the hiring of minority-owned consulting firms. She was recognized as a rising star by the champion of campaigns and elections in 2016 and was the only Democratic Latina in her class. She's the first in her family to graduate from college and receive a BA in political science with minors in psychology and education from American University. Thank you, Vanessa. Our next panelist is Felipe Benitez. Felipe is my boss at Corazón Latino. He has more than 15 years of experience in designing and implementing strategic communication programs to enhance and to protect the reputations of organizations, governments, companies, and brands. Through his prior work with leading organizations like United Way Worldwide, Fenton Communications, and Ogilvy Public Relations, Felipe has designed and implemented communications and outreach strategies for advocacy campaigns worldwide, from protecting the fundamental rights of indigenous groups in the Amazon to fighting climate change to helping protect the rights of immigrants in the United States. Thank you, Felipe. And lastly, we have a substitution. Thank you, Jorge. Jorge Bogantes works for Anacostia Watershed Society. Jorge is a natural resource specialist and has been leading the restoration efforts in and around the Anacostia River, including restoration for native tree species, wetland restorations, meadow restoration, and invasive plant management. Additionally, Jorge has helped the team of environmental educators teach youth and adults about the biodiversity of the river. Before joining AWS, Jorge worked for 6 years on biodiversity conservation efforts in his native Costa Rica. Jorge is often out on the river at dawn with his camera and shares his photography through the AWS Facebook page. Thank you, Jorge. So, real quick, by a show of hands, can you please let me know if you work for the government? At any level, federal, state, national, regional. Okay, what about nonprofit? Okay, great. And private sector? Okay, thank you. So with that, Vanessa, can you give us some information about some of your thoughts on the importance of diversity in boards in the workplace?
Can I ask another question? If you can raise your hand if you're the only person of color at your organization or one of the few people. So let's take a look around the room and see how much improvement needs to be made. What was the question? My thoughts on diversity?
Just give us a little bit about yourself, how you came to be in the position you are, and some of the challenges you found along the way.
So as my bio mentions, I'm the daughter of immigrants. So there have been many challenges. I'm the first in my family to go to college. And so every process has been a challenge because there hasn't been anyone in my family to guide me through that. I wasn't sure what to expect going in. I graduated with a political science degree. I wasn't sure what job prospects were out there, what I could do with that degree, which I've got questioned a lot of times with my family, but they were supportive along the way because they're just happy for me to go to college and experience all of that and to live a better life, which is what they came to the United States for and wanted me to have. I ended up meeting my boss just through networking and have been working with him at the firm. I'm now a partner there. So it's been great. As Abel mentioned, the firm is Latino owned and operated, so we can start there, and it speaks obviously a lot to my values about the importance of inclusion and diversity. And we help elect people of color running for office, specifically Latinos running for office. And we also help nonprofit organizations in their Latino outreach through GOTV tactics or mobilizing them through issue advocacy campaigns. So having them call their member of Congress, which was important in 2017 when the Trump administration was attacking our community. We have also worked a lot with environmental organizations, so I've learned a lot about the importance of diversity and inclusion there. And I've learned that communities of color are the most affected by climate change and air pollution, but yet we see that that is not reflected in leadership in environmental organizations. It's still white, male dominant, and there is really a need for people of color to be at the table since our communities are the ones heavily impacted by that.
Thank you. Felipe?
Well, so before I get started on the panel, I cannot use the privilege of the Holy Pulpit here for not giving a shout out to Ada and her presentation. I mean, we as Corazón Latino and my team has been personally blessed that Puerto Rico called us, El Yunque called us. So after Hurricane Maria, we were supporting as solidarity. I'm from Mexico, have a lot of great and very dear friends from Puerto Rico. We try to fundraise, try to do the best we could. There was a lot of challenges. A couple months later, two of our strongest partners, Environmental Defense Fund and the U.S. Forest Service, approached us with projects. And now we are in a very fortunate, we're very humble and honored to be supporting in any way we can. And I'm saying supporting, not helping, we're supporting the recovery. And we're doing some community engagement with El Yunque National Forest. Mostly they have the pictures that you saw. How do we bring nature back, but how do we bring even stronger connection between the human being, the health of the community, and the health of the forest? 2 weeks ago, I was lucky enough to give a presentation to some community leaders, and what I sort of my me saqué de la bolsa a phrase was, if we take care of El Yunque will take care of us. And I want to put that because it is one of our, from Corazón Latino's strong belief that if we take care of nature, nature is going to take care of us. And there's so many studies that show it. I mean, we know that just being out there, it helps us feel better, but it also makes us be better. So anyhow, we are doing, we're starting the work in the Yunque, and I'm so fortunate to be in this. So Ada will definitely need to catch up, party, and all the good stuff. And anybody, I do have I want to compliment one of what she said about what the diaspora, about all of us who care about Puerto Rico, what we can do. I think the two things from my humble perspective is, one, go back to the island, spend money there, help in the recovery, help in rebuilding the economy. And the second one, don't let the BS, and so pardon my French, that is happening here, don't let those arguments saying they had enough recovery money. We need to remind politicians, elected officials, and our own members of our community the stories, because as Ada's stories are just a sample of all the things. I mean, I describe it as a society, both in Puerto Rico and the diaspora, is going to PTSD. You just scratch a little bit and you will find a lot of healing to do, and we can support in that healing. There we have resources, we have the will, we have the love, which I think is more important, and we have nature to do that. So I think just keep that in mind. Keep our brothers and sisters from Puerto Rico in your prayers and in your thoughts, and every day figure out what can you do, because they have gone through a lot. We cannot even imagine what they went through, both in the island and the diaspora. So if there's any way we can support. Sorry, I got a little bit sidetracked from what I was about, but I thought it was important to mention. And if you want to volunteer doing some citizen science in El Yunque, come talk to us, because we'll need a lot of support. But should I go? Is there like the slides? Oh, and I want to be very quick because obviously too. We are as an organization, Corazón Latino, and personally, I've been very blessed to have help over the past 10 years. A lot of organizations be a better on their what it's called now the JEDI, Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. So we've done it in different ways, to government agencies like the Forest Service. There's some Forest Service here. Can you raise your hand? One of our good partners. Ruby Rivera from TNC. Organizations that are really investing and putting their money where their mouth is in really bringing diversity and inclusion. And I will share a little bit of the lessons learned and the recommendations that we give when this is happening. But we've also encountered those who just want to check a box, who just want to write in their annual report, oh yeah, we reached Latinos, we did an event with Latinos, and people of color showed up, and therefore we're good. And we've learned along that process, and a lot of recommendations, a lot of hard conversations need to happen to what Vanessa was mentioning, to really bring diversity. Diversity and inclusion doesn't come because the board of directors said it should be, or because you add it into a job description. It really takes a lot, both to serve Latinos or to serve diverse communities, and to bring them as part of your organization. So I'm gonna say that. I have other slides, but I don't want to abuse my time.
So I think can everybody hear me? It's critical to build bridges with the Latino community, because I mean, it has shown many times that Latinos care about the environment and believe that climate change is a threat to civilization. But I see a lack of those linkages to the environmental movement and environmental resources. So it's great to have, organizations, like the one where I work, Anacostia Watershed Society, or Corazón Latinos, or the Maryland Chispa program of the League of Conservation Voters, because we help bridge that gap. We in our education programs, for example, we work with a lot of kids. We're in Bladensburg, Prince George's County. That's a high Latino population area. You get Bladensburg, Riverdale, Colmer Manor. And we work with a lot of kids. Something that we're trying to do now is to work more with the adults and the families, which is easier said than done. And that's why we partner with people that know what they're doing, like Abel, or Ramon Palencia, and Ruby Stemble and others. And I think that's critical. And an example comes to mind. There's this young guy from the University of Maryland. He's Luis Chavez, studying environmental science. And I see that as a great example. He got like a scholarship from CVT to help Fred Pinkney. Fred Pinkney is a PhD scientist from Fish and Wildlife Service, doing research on freshwater mussels, which is something we're doing now. Since we don't have oysters, we're working with freshwater mussels. So Luis got a scholarship or something to work with Fred, and in a program to engage minority students in this type of scientific stuff. And there he was, working with a scientist like Fred, doing science for something very meaningful. And I think this is the type of connections we need, because the talent, the interest is there, but sometimes the access to the resources is lacking. And like Ada was saying, working with the children is very important. We get kids out there through our shad program, for example, to release shad fry, the baby shad fish, into the river, or rice rangers to plant wild rice, or now we have a mussel program. It's called Mussel Power. They keep the mussels in the classroom, and then they guess to release them in the river. And so these are unique opportunities that Latino kids don't always get. And if you think about yourselves, like a lot of you are from the in the environmental field. How did you get to that position? How did you became interested? Because you were playing in the mud with frogs, or doing something in the outdoors, and that's how we inspire the future generations. But we need the resources to link the people. And that kid playing with mussels is going to be a CEO of a nonprofit, or in the boardroom of an environmental company. Something that I also talk more on the adults and the first generation immigrants is also the lack of education resources. They are on the job. A lot of Latinos are working for companies that are doing stream restoration, tree plantings, and their training sometimes is minimal. I've been in cases where I talk to crews doing invasive plant removal, and they don't know what they are removing. So that basic training, and because again, Latinos are, since Latinos are a big part of the construction industry, but now in the ecological restoration industry, Latinos are a huge part. But again, we need more education, not only with people, first generation immigrants that are doing the hands-on work, but also the kids that will be the engineers. So, yeah.
Great, thank you. So the question that we get a lot, and I'm sure that you all have encountered, is how to engage Latinos. What's the secret formula? And as Ada said earlier, without the Latino perspective, there is a lack of understanding or perspective, and certainly empathy and sympathy for the lives of Latinos that are different from their traditional green space users. So without that perspective, internally, they can work with environmental groups that are represented here, which is fantastic. But I think that we need to move it to be more thoughtful and strategic about how we hire internally our organizations. So can you give some thoughts about some points of entry, in not only at the entry level, but the C-suite level and boards as well? If you have someone on your board who is there to give perspective or to encourage you or push you to be more diverse in your programming, be more empathetic in what you're putting forward, I think that would go a long way to inviting a whole new generation of students and families to be more involved in the environmental movement.
So let me build into what you just said. I think one of the recommendations we give to organizations that are trying to engage in Latino and diverse communities at every level is that they need to be ready to have tough conversations that will make them feel uncomfortable, conversations that may show that they're not ready or they need to take a lot of steps to be able to welcome the diverse communities into their organization. Let me call it a service, but from a grassroots perspective, the first thing that you need for an environmental organization or recreation or outdoor organization is to recognize that communities of color enjoy outdoors in a very, very, very different way than the mainstream or other communities. On the one hand, we have the hiking personal, I want to reach the 2.5 mile hike. And on the other hand, we may having an asado, we may having a soccer game. It's different ways. There's no right or wrong way. But if you are, as an organization, are trying to fit one on the other, it may work, but it's not gonna be as effective. So if you are managing a beautiful land like this one, well, if you're really serious and if you really want to engage Latinos, you need to be ready to have families doing a picnic, playing soccer, being loud, bringing music, being in the congas, because that's how we. So that's the first one, because people try to no, we want to bring them and do what we're doing, or do the hiking, but that might not be in the type of events that as Corazón Latino we organize for the community. We have all those elements. We have food, we have music. We have to have activities that cater from the little babies all the way to the abuelitos. So if you are doing an activity that it involves, or only activities that involve a lot of physical, you may lose some of those members, and next time they might not come back, because we do it on Sundays, because we know that Monday through Saturday, it is harder if you have working parents, and we do it on Sunday after church because we don't want to compete with God. So all of those elements, we have those conversations. That the Latino community is not a monolithic community, and I have a slide that we show, the one from the cake. We usually show this, and we ask the audience, all right, how do you call this in Spanish? And some say, bizcocho, pastel, torta, But then for those who are Mexican descent, a torta is a sandwich. So it's not monolithical, it's a diverse, so translations are not enough. So anyhow, those are the kind of conversations that we bring to our, and I'm sorry who have seen that leitmotiv that I always use. But it's a great way to exemplify how complex and how diverse our community is. And if we're talking about communities of color, then we have an added complication. I'm gonna stop there and I'm gonna let others win.
No, yeah, I think it's important to know how to engage our community first, as Felipe was talking about. I think Corazón Latino does a lot of did I just turn this off? Oh. In doing that. For example, I've been to a lot of their outdoor events, and I remember, well, even before that, I remember I mentioned to my cousin that I was going to go hiking, and she, obviously Latina, she didn't know what hiking was. She's 15 years old. She was like, isn't that dangerous? Like, what do you wear? Like, isn't it, like, she had no idea what hiking was. And so I was like, we really need to work on this. So I had to, like, maybe you can come with me another time, or like bring comfortable shoes. And it's not like what they expect it to be. Or it's also because they don't see us in those photos. People that look like us, they don't think that they can do those types of things. And the other thing is, we are, even for camping, for example, I had a camping activity or weekend last summer. That was my first time camping too. I don't have any of the equipment, which I'm sure our communities struggle with as well, because one, we don't know that that's an activity for us. Two, like, maybe we can't afford that. Also, how often do we go camping that we would in all of these activities? So that's something Corazón Latino also does a great job at, is giving out this gear and providing people with those opportunities. Another thing is thinking about how accessible these activities are. So I know you guys had a shuttle here to transport people from the metro. So a lot of communities of color, families maybe don't have their own cars. So is it accessible to, how can they even get out to these national parks if they don't have literally a way to get there? So those are all things that we need to think about. As Felipe said, what time you have the events, what days, those are all things that impact our community and our opportunity to attend as well.
We have question cards. We're going to circulate if you have any questions that you'd like to submit. We'll also take questions at the end. But let me just take this opportunity to transition just a little bit. I want, first of all, full disclosure, I'm on the IDEA task force of ANS, Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Access. And I want to applaud ANS for the steps that they are taking internally to recognize that they need to diversify the clientele that they serve. Also, what they look like internally. And there's a recognition that in this area, in Montgomery County specifically, 56% or nearly 60% of the population is non-Anglo, non-white. And the recognition internally was to get to the point where staff and participants reflect that number, which is a scary thing to think about if you're not part of that population. So what I wanted to put to the panelists is, what can we do as environmental advocates, professionals, scientists, to better position ourselves to jump into organizations, to promoting one another. How do we? What are some tips that you can do that if we're not engaging with organizations like ANS?
I want to second that. I think that the fact that we're having this event shows that the leadership of ANS in that topic, and congratulate ANS for that. My thought is that it would be great to have a strategy for community outreach, particularly outreach to Latinos in the DMV areas, because you get organizations like mine, like Anacostia Watershed Society. There's definitely interest in community outreach, but there's not always the expertise. I'm a natural resources guy. I know about muscles and trees and bunnies, but I don't know how to deal with people is and yeah
Trees and,
yeah
with trees and bunnies. That's
yeah it's actually more complex and it's easier said than done, and that's why like people like Corazón Latino are is great if we can create bridges between us, between the environmental organizations, to know what you're doing. Because I just started talking with Abel on how we can bring more people to our events, because at AWS we do tree plantings, trash cleanups. Even though I've seen some increase in the Latino attendance, for example, in trash cleanups mostly, but in tree planting, meadow work days, almost zero. And that's when I need to talk to folks like Abel and others, because they know what they're doing in terms of how to do the advertising and the outreach. So it would be great if we have like a DMV strategy where we can secure those bridges, and like between people that know how to do the outreach pretty well, and with people that have a lot to offer, like Anacostia Watershed Society in terms of environmental programming.
I want to add a few things on the more leadership and staff members. I do think that we need to do a better job on promoting each other, on highlighting our own work. I mean, sometimes because coming from a very competitive society, we think that if somebody's succeeding, we're taking space from another, and I don't think it's true. I think we all have opportunities. There's enough, more than a very wise woman that is advising us in fundraising told us there's enough work, enough need, and there's enough resources for everybody. So it's not a sum zero. It's a let's work together. Like, and we sometimes get a office get a little bit self-serving, and we try to like only us. But I've learned that when we highlight the community, when we highlight other leaders, and when we try to work in partnership, things come better. Sometimes we don't do it in practice. Sometimes we come back to those, but I do at least try to do that. And one of the things that I've seen, for example, Chuck Rocha, Vanessa's boss, he's an avid angler, and he calls himself a redneck.
Mexican
redneck. And he always has pictures of himself in the various, whatever he travels as for work, he finds a place where he can go fishing, and having somebody like him inspire other leaders that it can be done, that you can be that leader in the conservation and in spaces where we might not be as represented, like the angler and hunting. We need to bring those spaces, and we also need, as Ada was saying, inspire the youth. And on that experience and our partnership with the Forest Service and now with Nature Conservancy, we were able to bring Latinas that are scientists, that are in leadership position in these organizations, bring them and help them interact with the youth, with young people, we use media, we use social media, and that's such an important piece of inspiring the next generation. That's seeing somebody, I'm sorry, Helen couldn't come, but Helen Cortez from the U.S. Forest Service, Puerto Rican, that she's doing an amazing job in forest health protection. Somebody like her, like, oh, I can aspire to be like Helen, or Michelle Tamez, or so many people that are out there, making sure that they are talking to the youth. Natural History Museum is also doing it. So I think that's it's building that next generation of leaders through inspiration and through showing good role models that they're already out there.
I think Felipe brought up an important reminder, especially for people or communities of color, that there is enough room for all of us. Often we've been grown or raised to believe that if, as you said, like if one of us succeeds, that means another one fails, which is not true. Like we need to, another important mantra that I have is lift as you rise. So as you get promoted or whatever it is, bring someone with you. So it's not, we shouldn't be focused just on ourselves, looking out for ourselves. We need to look out for the community. And I struggle with this internally too, that it's it often falls on communities of color to diversify their own organizations, which it shouldn't be our job. Like, other people should find it important to do as well, but we're the best fit for it. So we are the best people to do it. So part of internal struggles as being a person of color. But I think I wanted to share that. So lift as you rise. Often women also struggle with this. Or we've been also raised to believe that we're each other's competitor, which is not true. You can see that on fashion magazines, who wore it best. Like, we always are led to be competitive with each other. But often when I had a professional networking event to mentor students of color going into politics, and so I was asked to be a participant in that, and I'm like, yes, I'll go. Can I bring 5 other women of color that are in this space with me? So that's also something that I find important. Something that I started a few years ago with a few friends was a space for young Latina millennials in the DMV area. So it started as a Facebook group, and we have brunches, like quarterly brunches, happy hours, if you're a Latina millennial in this space or in this area, let me know, and then we can add you to the group. And oftentimes during these brunches, find that it's a safe space for people. I grew up in this area, so I have a lot of friends and family and a large network here, but often people come to DC from out of town, obviously, and they don't have that network or space here. And as you guys saw, my first question, how many people of color, or are you the only person or one of the few people of color at your organization? That's true. A lot of Latinas find themselves in white dominant spaces, and they, at these brunches, feel comfortable being around other Latinas, people that speak Spanish, that know what type of food they eat, and then most importantly, that can pronounce their names correctly. So that's something, like, yeah, it's humorous, but also it's a very huge deal if you're being called the wrong name or not being respected enough to be pronounced by your name correctly each day. So it's like a lot of these little microaggressions that we need to be aware of. Anything else?
That was one of the questions here. How do you address the conflicts that come from culture shock, microaggressions? So I think you already hit the nail on the head with that one, so thank you for that. Anyone else want to weigh in on that? Okay, thank you. Question from the audience. What tensions, challenges, if any, have you witnessed between building environmental leadership locally and within communities versus building Latinx leadership at the mostly white organizations that have the money and resources? How do you find that balance?
There's definitely that disconnect between what's happening on the local level and what's happening in a C-suite. I mean, we need to be honest about it. I don't know that there's a lot of board members of C-suite in the large empower organizations that are like communities of color. Sometimes they're there because it makes them look good, something because it's part of trying to show. But we do need to make a better job by pushing these organizations to do the right thing, by proposing, by having folks like Chuck, that it's part of several board to push for others, to promote, as I was saying, to bring others to the table to say, hey, this person can also be a good leader in your organization. And again, I think the most important is having those tough conversations. It's letting them know that it's not something hip, it's not something that's good for them, not for the funders, it's survival for them. Because if you see the growth of the demographics in the population, all that good stuff, they know that if they want to stay relevant, they need to adapt and they need to bring and be welcoming in a meaningful way to communities of color. So I just think it's conversation, and it's not confronting them or like, oh, you should be doing. I mean, shaming sometimes works, but to a certain degree. But really, it's having those conversations, be part of those. And you will hear later from one of our partners, Melissa Vargas, who works at the Environmental Defense Fund. She's doing a magnificent job in having those tough conversations, and even small wins, even a few putting out a statement about dreamers or putting out a statement about things that may be out of the comfort zone for these bigger organizations. I think it's important. So it's a slow process, but we need to do it, and we need to be at the table. We cannot be confronting or again, that shaming doesn't works to a certain degree, but I think it's just continue to have those a place on the table.
Thank you. Next question. What can Latinx folks who want to advance in an org do to prepare themselves? For example, board service. Like what would be some good steps for someone to think about taking, maybe volunteering for an organization, translating some of their skills to maybe fundraising. What are your thoughts?
Go ahead. Well, I think one of the best ways to get into a board is be a good fundraisers. We have to bring money to an organization. So I think that's important, but not everybody has that skills at all, wants to develop those skills. But I do think that for young people, it's seeking mentors, seeking role models that will help you. There's a lot of great folks out there like Abel, like Chuck, all people all around that can help you understand, can help you refine your skills and be prepared. I mean, it is not that you need to be old or you need to be very wise to be a board member. Actually, boards will appreciate the point of view of millennials or younger generations. I just learned that my son is Generation Alpha. He's 7 years old. Anyway, 10. So of younger generation, and it's important to speak up. It's important to make your voice heard, but at the same time be respectful and be mindful of the space. So that will be my advice, just because I know that for better or for worse, what I've developed or what I've reached in my professional life has been because of the work of and a lot of the support of a lot of mentors throughout my life.
I just want to say I find it a little problematic that you need to have, I'm not familiar with boards, but you need to have that fundraising skill to be on a board, because in communities of color, or at least I was born, I guess I can speak for myself, not being good at asking for money. Like that's not something we do in my family. It's like kind of shameful if you have to ask someone for help in general, and then much less for money. So that's not a skill that comes naturally to Latinos, and I think I can say all communities of color. So that's a challenge I think that organizations need to look at their board too, because we also don't have these networks within our family, or much less in our workspaces, to come up or be able to provide that skill.
There's a lot of great questions, and unfortunately I won't be able to get to them all. But I do want to get to a couple more before our time runs out. Are there places you would recommend recruiting new staff when your goal is to increase Latino and Latina representation in your organization? Do you have any resources out there?
Do you want to take that one?
Oh, you can go. Or this one.
I think there's some existing really good networks like Engage Latinos, like the Next 100 Coalition, that bring a lot of young people that are interested in this space. But I think just reaching out from a young age in terms of like starting to develop those relations with youth from high school, because we also need to understand that Latino communities of color don't necessarily follow the same path in terms of after high school you immediately go to college. You might have a year off, you may have to work a little bit. So you need to be developing those relationships for what the Forest Service and other agencies consider the career path. So I think it is important to make sure that you are developing those relationships, those trust, that they know that the organization exists, that there's a potential of having a career in these areas from an early age.
Yeah, I would say just very quickly, looking at transferable skills. So maybe they don't know a lot about animal species, or like whatever issue or topic is important to the organization, but that's something they can learn. So maybe they have campaign experience organizing the community. That's something that they can bring to the organization that may not necessarily be a qualification. So that's something that we should definitely, or people that hire others look at and consider when that will make our community more inclusive. And I just wanted to say quickly also that when we say diversity, we should not look just at people of color, but also consider the age. So maybe you're getting a lot of Latinos, a bit like older men, but we should also look at women and younger generations. We should also look at people with disabilities. Like everyone has a different perspective that they could bring to the table.
And just a quick anecdote. So how we hooked in real, Vanessa and Sonia. You raise your hand, Sonia. They have no background in. Sonia is my chief operating officer, and one of my two right hands. I have three right hands actually. We invited them to an event called River Palooza, then it was Rio Palooza. And as Vanessa was mentioning, I don't think they have done a lot of kayaking or any hardcore, and they fell in love with it, and now they're stuck with us. So providing these opportunities for youth, for diversity is really important. And there's a great case study in Houston with the Ford High School, and we don't have the time now, but I'd be happy to talk about it. And then Kimberly Conway from Forest Service, you want to raise your hand? She can also tell you a lot of great stories about how that worked.
Maybe about how Sonia didn't have any.
Yeah, she was like basically she didn't have Sonia didn't have any environmental background, but she was a great political consultant and a great organizer, and so like that's what I need. And she now. In 2 years, right, or 3? I don't know. It's been a long time. but it is that transferable skill set that Vanessa alluded to.
Okay, this is it's two questions that I'm going to kind of merge into one. When it says one is to promote engagement and participation, do you think promoting leadership in the community should be a priority instead of recipients of services? And then the other is, have you encountered the feeling of distrust in the Latino community? So the problem that I've found that we've discussed is the pipeline for students, for people, for anyone to get engaged is very thin or broken. So getting people interested in the environment, you need to overcome the distrust. So what can we work to do, or how do you suggest that we work to get over or overcome the distrust found among the Latino community?
Jorge, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, again, thinking about this young guy from University of Maryland, Luis Chavez, like I said, we need to connect them with these resources. And then, I mean, there's a lot of potential leaders and scientists there. We just need to connect to the right places. And, you know, like, for example, University of Maryland might be a place. University of Maryland is pretty diverse, and there's a lot of people studying. You know, and I heard from another Latino family that used to be his mother was the daycare provider for my daughter, and their son got a scholarship to study business, and it's a Salvadorian family. So, you know, there's a lot of leaders in the making there, so we just need to make the right connections to these places.
We just have experience. We are partnering with the Association of Natural Forest Therapy, the forest bathing, and we just had a family, a woman and part of the community, neighbor of Abel, who just trained as a forest therapy guide, and we're really excited about it because it's a landmark for her personally, but also for the movement. We haven't heard about forest therapy. Google it; it's an amazing opportunity. But yes, opening those spaces.
Raquel
Raquel
this was the first time that she spent a night away from her children. Her oldest son is 16 years old.
And she spent 7 away. 7 days away.
Oh, wow.
So it was a big challenge for her, and it was something that was very uncomfortable for her, but she did it. And just real quick, we are out of time, but one of these questions that I think that is really important to address, it is the issues and values most important to Latinos, first-generation immigrants that are relevant to the environment and environmental stewardship. The work that we do, that a lot of you do, is promoting our environment. But I think that to answer this question, at least for us, we found that making the connection to healthy environment and healthy self is the number one thing that gets people interested in coming back. When you talk about the familia, right? When you're talking about the communities of color, we typically live in areas with low tree canopy, high areas of concrete or impervious surfaces. Trees give us shade, they clean the air, they clean the water. So when we're able to promote or make the connection between environment and health, we found that that's been most successful and most resonant to our program participants. But we're out of time. Thank you to the panelists. I really appreciate your perspective. Round of applause. Thank you very much.